Hi, and welcome to another edition of Seniors Today. I'm your host, Tom Barty, and our guest today is Mr. Mark Walter, who is with a company called Cinelease. And Mark, you're the director of?
Studio development.
Studio development.
Yeah.
So for those that are as ignorant about the movie industry as I am, what is studio development, and how would you define your job?
So basically what I do on a day-to-day basis when people ask me, like, because there's a lot of different parts to what I do, but for the most part I develop and manage motion picture and television studio facilities. So that would mean building it from the ground up in some cases, or in some cases like in Mare Island, converting warehouses, industrial buildings into sound stages for production use. So that's kind of one part of what I do. And then once the studio is up and operating, then I manage it and also market the studio and bring in productions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Cinelease and your sound stages and studios could be offered or leased out by any movie company.
Correct. For the most part, because they're large stages, I deal mostly with network television and large, features. So your major studios like your Sonys and Warner Brothers, Paramount, companies like that. But we do get some commercials, independent features, student film projects. So yeah, it runs the gamut.
That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you end up? You have an office on Mare Island. How did you end up in Vallejo?
Wow. So what I usually do in the last, I would say, I don't know, maybe about 15 years, there's been a big push for the other states doing incentives, filming incentives. And so right now, like the states of Georgia, Louisiana, New Mexico, those are three of the largest. Those states offer incentives to production companies when they spend dollars locally. So California has been losing some market share. Couple years ago, California brought that incentive back. And when they did, Sacramento said, hey, we're going to bring the incentive back, but we were going to do an extra 5% anything outside of LA County, Los Angeles County. So what I do initially is I'll work with a real estate developer in some of these other states that I mentioned, and they'll say, okay, we want to do a market analysis. Basically, how many stages would that area need? Along with, there's other parts, what type of infrastructure, what type of crew base. We need a workforce to work at the studios. So when California brought the incentive back, I did a market analysis of Northern California. And I narrowed it down to 4 different sites. And when I went on to Mare Island, I said, yeah, this is it. It had basically everything that we needed to run a successful operations.
So that would mean vacant buildings and a cooperative landlord and...
Yeah, those are parts of it. I would say probably the number one thing is having the land available. I don't care what studio you go to, if it's an old studio or a new studio. Parking is a really big issue because obviously there's a lot of trucks and you have you need crew parking, you have your cast, extras, background. So parking's important. And then the things that the area has to offer, your hotels, your restaurants, your services for the studio. With Mare Island, as you mentioned, there's large buildings there that hadn't been used in quite a while. So we went in there, repurposed some of those buildings, cleaned them up, and in one case we had to put up some soundproofing, and then office space, for example, we had to redo some of the offices. The production companies, if they're coming to an area like Northern California, like Vallejo, they will set up shop and they need a lot of space. So office, mill to build the sets, warehouses to store set, deck, and props. So yeah, Mare Island was a natural fit.
So how many sound studios do we have on Mare Island right now that you're involved with?
So it's a little bit different there. Our main stage is one large building that we broke up into 3 different spaces. So it's basically 3 stages in one building. which it consists of a 65,000 square foot stage, 25,000 square foot stage, and a 15,000 square foot stage. And then we have a second building we just got just a couple months ago that is a 14 and an 18. So about 5 stages. And again, you know, they're not, usually when I go into a new site, we'll build from the ground up, and it's usually concrete tilt-up, state-of-the-art stages. I work with a gentleman by the name of Gary Bastian. He's an architect based in Southern California, and every studio, well, maybe not every studio, but most studios since 1998, he's had a part in it, designed it, and then I would come in and actually deal with more of the operations and get it up and running.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to put all those together?
So here at Mare Island, we took over the building, that would have been in March of 2016, and they were shooting in there in about June of 2016. And again, you know, the building was already up and erected, so all we had to do was go in and put the soundproofing, do a little bit of cleanup, and get it up and running. So if you're doing it from the ground up, if it's a concrete tilt-up, it's usually about an 8 or 9 month process to get it from.
And I heard you say that parking is a big issue because of staff and extras and all the people that are involved.
Sure.
Right now, how many people are in Vallejo working on movies? Are you aware of that number?
Yeah, we report back to the city on those employment numbers. It's a moving target. It depends on the day. But for example, last Tuesday, I had about 650 people working on the island for the 2 shows that I currently have. And when I say 650, that's the supporting folks as well. So your caterer, security, janitorial, all the different services that go into that. We had a large number of extras on that day. A typical show will hire about 100 to 150 people full time, and then it goes up from there, depending on what they're shooting, what the scene is, where they're at. So yeah, it's so our top number so far has been that 650, which, you know, I was really proud about that. That's 650 people that are from the Bay Area that are working. A lot of them, the way that it works when you have a union show, they are looking for locals to work, because if they have to bring them from the outside, they have to pay a per diem. So one of the challenges we have is to increase the crew base here in the Bay Area.
So bringing somebody from the outside means outside of 30-mile radius
Correct.
From the site?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so and that's why, you know, people ask me, you know, same question you asked about why Vallejo. It's in the 30-mile zone, which is from San Francisco out. So we're in that zone, so we don't have to pay a per diem as long as they're in the Bay Area. I wish, you know, we would had all, you know, when I say local, like Vallejo employees, but a lot of them are from the surrounding, you know, Bay Area.
So the people that you're working with right now are mostly Paramount, and it's for TV series and for a movie?
Correct, yeah. So we have an ongoing Paramount television show that's it's on Netflix, but Paramount produces it, along with Anonymous Content, another production company. They're in their 2nd season. And then we also have a really large Paramount feature that's shooting. They're based in Mare Island, but shooting all over the Bay. They also shot in downtown Vallejo as well. Both shows actually do a lot of shooting in downtown Vallejo.
When you say shooting, you're
filming.
talking strictly film.
Filming,
right?
yeah. Filming.
Yeah, well, that's good. And so, Anonymous Content, they actually are headquartered out of Los Angeles?
Correct, yeah. So they will, you know, Paramount and Anonymous based in LA, but their production office is based either on the island or in Vallejo. One's on the island, one's on the Vallejo side. It's some office space. They usually take about, depending on the show, probably about 15,000, 20,000 square feet of office space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, I understand that there's union involvement in the industry.
Correct,
And
yeah.
how many different unions are you working with right now?
That's a good question. So each area of the country, even of the state, it's a little bit different. You know, you have your major like IATSE, which handles a lot of the different trades, anything from like carpentry to craft service, and then of course, you know, Teamsters, and then you have your Screen Actors Guild for the actors. So yeah, there's, I don't know the exact number, but here IATSE handles a lot of the different trades. Under one umbrella. But I mean, it's an important question, and I think people ask me, what can we do to attract more production? And I really think we need to increase our, like I mentioned earlier, our crew base, and that's through the union leaders allowing, you know, the younger, you know, folks to get in there and get the training and be a part of the union. You know, it's kind of a double-edged sword because you can't have too many union members, and then if there's not enough work, they're just kind of sitting around waiting for work. So it's a kind of a balance of finding the right number of union members, and that's their job.
Can you define IATSE? I know there's
IATSE.
The game.
Yeah, no, yeah, IATSE. Yeah, I know it's
Yeah.
it's an acronym, but it basically it's kind of the umbrella for all of the different trades that are underneath it. It's like International Alliance of Theatrical Employees, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact.
I had a chance to meet a couple people that talk about having a career of involvement with the production side of the movies, and it sounded like a really interesting career. And the one gentleman indicated that in a way for him it's kind of feast or famine with the employment. Is that really true, that it's really cyclical for a lot of these people?
You know, I would say that it is, you know, for take a network show, for example, they do have a hiatus period where they will go down. The show goes down usually between like kind of Thanksgiving and New Year's will go down, and then again in the spring. Those seasons have kind of changed a little bit in that your kind of what I call new media, like your Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, their seasons are a little bit different, but historically it's always been that way. If they're a union member, they usually go job to job. So if they're, for example, they're on a network show, when that show wraps out and they're on hiatus, then you go into pilot season. So then they can jump onto a pilot, and then same thing with features. If it's not your kind of network season, is usually your feature season. That's changed a little bit, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for them to go from one to the other, you know, really cleanly. So there may be a little downtime. Here in the Bay Area, it seems like there's a lot of commercial work. So I think they're lucky in that sense that they can go and hop on a commercial. You know, we've done in the off season, I think we did 3 different commercials that we were able to utilize the island while the show was down for hiatus.
Well, one of the people I talked to also indicated that he loves the work, and you know that's what brings him back, and that he said the money is good.
Yeah.
So that's always important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the union positions pay well, and they're highly sought after, and you know we've created this program. It's a workforce training program that I've done in other studios, and I brought it here, and we're just getting it going. And it's basically to do just that, to get some of the younger folks that are maybe in film school or even, you know, in high school, to get them on to get a union job and then create a roster where I can hand that roster to the production companies. You know, I consider any studio outside of the LA area a destination studio, and that means that my job's a little different. Now I have to be more of a kind of one-stop shop. So not only do I help them, you know, with the offices and the sound stages, but you want to help with vendors, crew, locations, and a big part of that, like I mentioned earlier, is the crew base. So the way that the program works is that we take high school media arts students and let them intern at the studio. They'll work with the Cinelease equipment, and then also with studio operations. So it's kind of 2 jobs, you know, in one. So at the end of the internship, their resume will show 2 different jobs. and then we help them get into a film school, which is kind of tier 2, and then when they could come back as an intern and work a few more hours, give them more responsibilities, obviously a little bit older, so they can do some different things. When they're done with film school, and that could be community college level or at a university level, they're done, then we can bring them onto the roster. I have a saying where keep local talent local, and that's really important, because if the kids have to travel and go to, let's say, LA, Chicago, New York, or the other states that I mentioned, like Atlanta, it's really busy right now, then we're going to lose that talent to those other areas. So by creating an infrastructure here, then we could keep those kids here and keep them in the area.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a minimum age that you look for when you employ extras and things like that?
I'm not as involved with that. That's more of on the production level. But yeah, they try to. They like to use 18 and over, because then they can use them for a longer period of time. For the internship program, we usually start with juniors going into their senior year of high school, and we work them. They can work up, I think during the summer, up to 8 hours, but we usually try to keep them at like 4 to 6 hour shifts. But yeah, to answer your question, I think the production companies would prefer if their actors were over 18.
Mm-hmm. So do you have to be available when they're doing the filming? Or can you kind of go home and hang out and be available by phone? Or
yeah.
Do they need you there, or how does that work?
I try not to go onto the sound stage as much as possible. For me, I've been doing this for quite a while, and when you go onto a sound stage, I can't get any work done. I got to turn my phone off. There's no way to do what I do. I occasionally go on just to see what's going on, but for the most part, I'm in the office trying to bring the business in, so my job's a little bit different. I do sometimes have meetings if there's facilities issues with the stage, something going on, then yeah, I'll go and kind of see what's going on. But and then sometimes we'll give, if I have to give a tour to a producer of the stage, then I'll bring them on and kind of show them the size. They want to know, how much open space they have, what's the ceiling height, how much parking, all of the details before they decide to come and shoot or film in Mare Island.
So did you have any special education that led you into this industry, or did you fall into it by accident, or how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly that. I really fell into it by accident. My career prior to getting into the studio development business was I worked for the fire department. And so I went to school for fire science. I worked for the fire department for about 7 years. And what had happened is when productions are shooting, they need to have a fire safety officer. And you have to go through a special training for that. And each year in California, a particular studio sponsors that training. So this is going back to the 90s. But Sony Studios in Culver City was sponsoring it that particular year. Mm-hmm. It's a 4-day certification class. So after 4 days, I was ready to go back to my department, and Sony said, "Hey, would you want to come work for us? We have an opening." And at that point, I'd worked for the U.S. Forest Service fighting forest fires, brush fires on a hotshot crew. So that's tough work. And so I said, "Well, wait a minute. So I'm going to be working on an engine on a movie lot? Yeah, I kind of like that." And so started working for them, and then kind of moved up the ladder, got more into operations, and got into the facility, like managing the facility. And yeah, the rest is history. Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I always had a sense that you had a burning desire for what you do.
Yeah, no, it's different. I think that working for the fire department gave me a certain work ethic that, and an approach to things where you have to problem solve and put out fires, and I'm pretty good at doing that. So I think that when I first started working for the studio, at the time Sony was acquiring a lot of properties in Culver City, either buying or leasing. So I was on a team that would go and do an assessment of that building. So I got pretty good at it, and then I started finding off-lot buildings for the company to either lease or buy. And that's really what got me going more on the operations side. So I was pretty proactive and aggressive in trying to find these properties. And still to this day, I do that. I mean, I was involved with the studio out of state, and they had a staff in that particular state, and I still went in there, was able to locate and target the land and then develop it. And so, yeah, I'm pretty good at finding things, finding buildings and land and doing an assessment.
Well, I know you talk about dealing with quick turnarounds and building things and hiring all these different vendors.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been quite a few businesses in Vallejo that have benefited from you being here, and are really thankful for for being chosen to be a supplier of whatever you guys might need. So it's, from that perspective, I know it's been great having you here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I should mention we have a what we call a local spend rebate program, and the way that works is really simple. We try to find vendors that are in the city of Vallejo. Sometimes it's not a perfect science. We have to go to the county, within the county. But the way that it works, and like for example, one of those companies that probably the biggest spend is with lumber. The productions use a lot of lumber to build sets, and so the local lumber company, we made it. They're one of the vendors part of that program. So the way it works is that the production company buys the lumber. At the end of the job, they pay their final invoice, and then that vendor gives them a 5% rebate back, almost like a coupon, but it's a cash rebate. So it goes on top of the 25% that the state is offering. So now that allows me to compete with the state of Georgia. They offer a 30% rebate. So here in California, we do 25%. So with this 5% local spend, anything they spend local with that particular vendor, they'll get a rebate back. And so now it's an even playing field. And it's been really important, and it's everything from lumber to hotel rooms, office supplies, down to even your dry cleaners and florists. So anything that they may need. And I try to focus on like the mom and pop businesses in Vallejo. I think that's really important. For example, we use Foster Lumber as one of the local lumber companies versus like a Home Depot or some big chain. I try to focus. Doesn't always happen, but that's what we try to do.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know they all appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we try.
So looking to the future, I guess I'm speaking for myself, but I would think that the city of Vallejo would love to continue to have you here. Do you have any plans for the future? Are you taking a day at a time, or?
We do. Yeah, there are definitely some plans. What we're doing now, I would consider our phase one was getting the studio up and running, getting the buildings ready for use by productions, and that was, like I mentioned earlier, putting some soundproofing in. But at the end of the day, we need some large, purpose-built stages to really attract the shows and keep the shows here, keep the Paramount, type folks here long term. So we have some plans that we're working on currently on Mare Island to build those stages. So initially we're looking for our phase two is three more sound stages, concrete tilt-up, state-of-the-art sound stages, along with a production support building that will allow us to really attract and keep those productions here. So yeah, that's our next phase, and we've already started working on that.
Well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So,
what kind of square footage would the new stages be? Similar to the other ones?
A little different. So it would be it would be three 20,000 square foot stages, but continuous. So the way that works, we now are able to. When I say state of the art, the stages have like an accordion style wall that will open up. So you would have one large, what we call a super stage, which is 60,000 square feet, or three individual stages. So most network shows, three is kind of the magic number in that most network shows want three stages. So we can attract a large show and hopefully get them to stay here.
And so the accordion separator is soundproof and all that.
Correct, and that's a big challenge, and that was challenging. Some other studios over the last 15, 20 years have tried that, and it didn't succeed. There was a little bit of nosebleed, going from stage to stage. With the new technology that Gary Bastian utilizes, we're able to do that and get the soundproofing that we need.
It'd be like Get Smart and the Cone of Silence.
Correct.
I know that's not right. But so your office is on Mare Island on
Correct.
Walnut,
Yep,
right
there.
next to another famous location on Mare Island.
Correct, yeah.
And I know that there have been activity at the Rodman Center, and I mean, is the location of your sound studios? I know at least the 3 in that one building. Is that public information?
Well, I think definitely
Doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, yeah. There's information out there. Obviously on with social media and the internet. IMDb, which is like an industry website, has some information on where certain shows are shooting and located. Mm-hmm. And then just recently, because there has been a little bit more activity, and I think there was a local article in the paper about what we were doing. Mm-hmm. I had a few folks knock on my door at the office, and some are just saying, "Hey, thanks for doing this," and others are saying, "Hey, can I get a job?" So there's definitely a lot of interest, and the shows are popular. They're popular shows, so I think we're real fortunate to. Sometimes these shows, there'll be a pilot and they go away, and it seems like the show that we have is doing pretty well.
Well, we're out of time.
Okay.
I know it always goes so fast. And I really appreciate you being here, and I know we really appreciate the industry choosing Vallejo for what they do with film and TV.
Great. Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you guys. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So that's all the time we have for today. Our show airs Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. on Comcast 27, AT&T UVerse 99, and streaming live video at vcat.tv. Come see us again next time.